All right. Well, first of all, for those I haven't met, I'm Dr. Colin. I'll give you just a little brief history. So, I was in practice for 30 years. Graduated with Phil actually from CMCC, and the first few years of practice was a real learning curve for us coming out of CMCC, and I'm sure you CMCC grads will understand that. So, and it was really kind of neat because it's funny how your life gets shaped by the people that you start to meet and start to associate with, and you become influenced by. And our life really did change by the people that we were influenced by, which was really fun. And that's brought us down a path which has just been absolutely magnificent and beautiful. So now that I'm out of practice, we sold the practice actually a couple years ago. And it's funny because the first couple of months after selling a practice, I thought, oh, I'm free, retired, blah, blah, blah. You know, we did well financially and we can sit back and live up at the cottage and, you know, it's on the lake and everything. And man, did I ever get bored. Like I have to be in chiropractic because I just love it. It's so much fun to be in chiropractic. So, so one thing leads to another, and you know we're still coaching, and we still are highly involved with Max Living, and then we have this Canadian version of Max Living that we call DC2, and we get to coach and consult and you know just work with chiropractors and teams all the time, which is just a blessing. It's a lot of fun helping people to just find their purpose and put procedures into their office just to be able to have their message get to more people, right? Phil said that, get your message to more people. So, but I want to go back. I want to just share a little bit of history with you and talk a little bit about this today as we open up today to hopefully get your mindset in the right place for the rest of the day, because Dr. Justine is going to be sharing a lot of stuff with us today. And I'm sure it's going to be absolutely brilliant because I've known Justine for a long time, and she is just like the most committed person when it comes to self-development and getting the best out of her and everybody around her. So we're in for a treat today. So lately, here's where it starts. Lately, I started this podcast, and I committed to doing this podcast in 2025, and I said I'm going to do a podcast every week in 2025, and the purpose of the podcast is to bring attention to the principle of chiropractic. Right? It's all about vitalistic health. And I want this message, and this was my focus in practice, I want that message to get to as many people as possible because I know how it changed my life. When I really understood the principle of chiropractic, that this body is self-regulating and self-healing and self-adapting as long as there's no interference. And when I can, and that's a simplified version of that, but when I can share that with people, I see the light bulb go on and I see their lives change. Their choices change, their families change, their relationships change, their health changes. It's amazing when people get that principle. So I said, I'm going to do this podcast to raise awareness for that principle within the profession. So I've reached out to a lot of people to be on the podcast, and I've had some really well-known people. Ed Cordero, who was the president of Sherman College, who's now the president of the ICA, just got appointed the president of the ICA. He was on the podcast. Irene Gold, who is the wife of the late Reggie Gold, who, if you don't know who Reggie Gold is and you're in the profession, you'll find out, because Reggie was probably one of the best communicators and speakers ever to grace this profession. And then, gosh, I've had Neil Cohen on there and David Fletcher, who's the CEO of the Insight of CLA, which produces the Insight technology, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And so just this week, just yesterday actually, I had Gilles Lamarche, who's the vice president of Life University. And earlier this week, I had Monique Andrews. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, too. So, but it's been so much fun doing this podcast. But here's the thing that I like to learn is that I want to know what inspired all these people to become chiropractors, right? So I want you guys to think today is that why did you get into this profession? Whether you became a chiropractor or whether you're a kinesiologist working in this profession or whether you're a CA working with one of the chiropractors in one of the offices, how did you get involved in this profession? Hi, Morgan. Welcome. So that's what I want you to kind of think about today. And I want to just share with you this story because I really got into the profession by accident. I went into chiropractic school kind of as an accident. I was at Guelph. I was in kinesiology, thinking that I might like to go to medical school. Some of my friends were getting into pharmaceutical sales, and that was a big drawback at that point because You could get a company car right off the bat. You'd have like a $60,000 to $70,000 salary, which back in the late 80s, early 90s was pretty significant. And it was a pretty good deal. I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. So we looked into that, looked into med school, looked into that. But my heart was, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to go teach, and ideally high school and phys ed and stuff like that, geography. That's what I wanted to do. So I actually applied to Teachers College here in Ontario. And I had great marks at Guelph and university. My marks were close to 90, like high 80s, close to 90. But I didn't get in to Teachers College. What's wrong with that? So a couple of my buddies said, hey, we're going down to check out this chiropractic college in Chicago. You want to come? Sure. I like Michael Jordan. I was in the height of Michael Jordan days, right? So we went down to Chicago, and honestly, it was well, I'll tell you really quickly. This is the very first person I met in Chicago at the school to greet us was a guy named Mel Collins. He was the student liaison officer. And my buddies arranged the tour through Mel Collins. Well, he met us at the door. But it's like they rolled out the red carpet for us. I thought, this is pretty impressive. And Mel Collins comes walking up to the door. I swear to God, he's wearing a suit. And he comes walking up to the door like this. Hi, I'm Mel Collins. Welcome to National College of Chiropractic. Don't worry, Chiropractic didn't do this to me. that was my introduction. So it was funny because he's giving us a tour through the school, and these are the lecture halls, and we're walking down the hall, and there's the three of us and Mel, and he's giving us the tour. He's walking down the hall, and he said, over here on the right-hand side, he goes, we do cadaveric dissection in the anatomy lab. And we walked by the anatomy lab, and there's a big glass, and you can see the bodies lying on the table. I don't know if it's still like that, but back in the late 80s or early 90s, it was like that. He goes, this is the anatomy lab. Hey, Colin, stand on my right. I can't see you when you're over on my left. So that was my first introduction to chiropractic. But it was such a cool experience. I thought, this is what I want to do. And I went home and actually looked into CMCC, but at the time, there was 150 spots for 3,500 applicants. I thought, I don't want to waste another year. I don't want to sit around working for another year waiting to go to chiropractic school. So I talked to mom and dad, and I said, I'd like to go to Chicago. Sure enough, we made it happen. And I started there in 1989. And then the cool thing was, well, not the cool thing, but there was a whole bunch of Canadian students there. I actually met a girl named Ann Bonus, who, if you're a hockey fan, turns out her brother is Rick Bonus, who was the coach of Winnipeg Jets, and he's been in the NHL for like 50 years. He played, and then he was assistant coach and a coach and all kinds of different teams. And she said to me the very first week that we met, hey, I'm from North Bay, I'm Ann Bonus. You might know my brother. He's in the NHL. I said, Rick Bonus. I'd never heard of him. But now, sure enough, here we are like 40 years later, and he just retired. So it's kind of cool. But what happened was the majority of the Canadians transferred back after the first year, because the dollar at that time was like it is now, and we're paying like $1.40 on the dollar, but they weren't taking money at par. So we thought, this is crazy. I couldn't work down there. I couldn't get a part-time job because I didn't have my working visa. So we transferred back, came to CMCC, which worked out well because I met my wife. Anyway, long story short, we got into practice. But here's the cool thing is that we started our practice just the way we learned in CMCC. Okay? So you guys all know what happened was, so we thought, okay, well, we got to buy thumpers because that's what we learned at CMCC. We got to buy an IFC. We got to buy an ultrasound. And, we would see people 3 times a week for 3 weeks, no matter what the problem. I mean, because that's what we did in clinic. And so we started and we grew. And honestly, Kim and I were, I think, very in tune together. And we knew one thing is that we just felt that we weren't in the health or chiropractic business. We were in the people business. So we just decided we wanted to care for people like we would care for our own family and really serve them well and really create great relationships and trust and rapport. And we grew. And we grew actually quite well. So this is what happened in the first year of my practice. And it really kind of shaped my thinking is that, there. So this is my Aunt Ruth. I'll tell you a little story about my Aunt Ruth. So my Aunt Ruth came in to see me first year in practice. And of course, we had just opened up from scratch. I didn't know how to build a practice, but we rented some space. We were paying $800 a month for our leased space. And we had 3 adjusting rooms and a waiting area, right? So it worked out. 3 tables. And I thought, oh, this would be really cool because we had doors between the rooms. I can go, when it's really busy, I can go back and forth between the rooms, but it was never that busy in our first year. So Aunt Ruth came in and we started talking. Well, I'm her godson, okay? So she comes in, she's a farm lady. So she's super strong. She's working all the day. I remember when I was a little kid going out to their farm, and they had 200 head of dairy cattle. But back in those days when I was a little kid, they would milk them by hand, literally by hand. And it wasn't until I was probably in my teenage years where they got the automatic milking machines, but they would still have to manually go and hook them up and start the automated milkers. But when I was a little kid going out to the farm, and I remember this vividly, going into the barn, and they had the hayloft above where the cows were, and the cows were all in their stalls. I'm maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I remember this absolutely vividly. I thought it'd be really cool to go running under the cows' bellies. So there's a line of cows, probably 30 to 40 cows long, in the stalls of this barn, and I took off from one end, and I'm literally running, and I'm slapping their udders as I'm running through. Swear to God, slapping their. My mom is out, she's screaming at me, calling at it. Like, I could have got kicked or killed, or one of them fell up, whatever. But all the way through, slap, 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 slap. So, so what happened then is Aunt Ruth came into the office when I was in my first year of practice. And Kim was associating at a fellow in Cambridge. So she was half an hour away, Drew Potter. I don't know if you remember Drew. You might remember Drew Potter. He was president of CCO for a little while. Anyway, so she was associating there. So I'm in the practice, and she came in, and she doesn't have pain, but she wanted some orthotics. Well, we got taught at CMCC, and we actually had the orthotic rep from the orthotic group come in and talk about orthotics. We thought, okay, we got to get orthotic molds, and we got to do orthotics. So we hooked up with the orthotic group, and we were selling orthotics. Well, orthotics, and for those of you who sell orthotics, there's a pretty nice margin in orthotics. So she actually wanted 2 pairs of orthotics. Right on, Aunt Ruth. Okay, so fine. So we fit it for orthotics. So I just happened to start talking to her about what's going on, and she feels fine, but she started saying something like, she goes, I've been feeling kind of lightheaded lately, and she goes, I might be having some high blood pressure issues. Aunt Ruth at this time was probably in her early 70s. I said, well, and honestly, I didn't know why I said this, but hey, why don't we just do an exam and check your spine? Okay. She said, okay, fine. She goes, I don't really have any pain. I said, okay, but let's check your spine anyway. And I remember palpating her spine, and I got to her neck, and it was like rock. I thought, this is, for the 32 patients that I saw in clinic, this doesn't feel the same, right? So there's something wrong here. So I said, I know you're not having any pain, but do you think it'd be worthwhile for us to get some x-rays of your spine? I think that might be a good idea. She said, well, if you think it's a good idea. So she did. So we didn't have an x-ray machine in her office. We had to send her to a medical clinic, which we had arranged, and they did the x-rays. And keep in mind, we didn't have computers when we started. We had files for every patient. We had files with a bunch of papers in them, and we sent them out, and she got her x-rays, and she brought them back in a big envelope, but we had a view box so we could take a look at them, right? So they were just film x-rays. So she brought them back, and so her neck was something, and this is not her neck, but it's something similar to what I saw, because we didn't have digital x-rays or anything back then, and never kept the films for that long, but it was something like this. So is that a good neck or not, right? Even the students know, that's not a good neck. So you can see she's got a kyphotic neck. There's, clearly, and I'm going to use the word subluxation, so you might not agree with that word, some of you guys from school or whatnot, but they are severely subluxed. There's obvious subluxation. So what's going on with her nerves? Total damage. I don't know how she's functioning at this point. It's so bad. And this, in fact, in her x-rays, this was all fused down here. You couldn't see any disc spaces. So I said to her, wow, I honestly don't know how you're functioning as well as you're functioning, because your spine's really, really bad. Why don't we start adjusting you? She said, okay, if you think that's a good idea. I said, okay, fine. So I'm trying to adjust, and literally, and I'm a pretty good adjuster, and I am a pretty aggressive adjuster. I couldn't get her neck to move. I really couldn't get her neck to move with all, so it's a lot of mobilization and whatnot. Within about 3 months, though, a lot of things started happening. She was so far gone. So she started dropping things, and she would come in and tell me, and she was coming in the early stages, she was coming in 3 times a week, and then we'd kind of advance her to once a week, but she would come in and she'd say, I'm kind of dropping things. And she said, and this is probably over the period of 6 months, I'm starting to notice that I'm having a hard time speaking. I know the words that I want to say, but I can't get them out of my mouth. And so she would go to say a sentence and the word couldn't come. And it gradually started getting worse. So, of course, she goes and sees her medical doctor. And next thing you know, she's on a bunch of medication. So here's a lady who never took a medication in her life, lived healthy on the farm. They ate raw, they drank raw milk out of the cow. So, and then she starts taking these medications. And next thing you know, it's 3 medications, 4 medications, 5 medications. And so I'm watching through all this. Well, I became her power of attorney for her health, for her and her husband. And so it got a little worse and got a little worse, finally to the point where she couldn't walk properly. Like, she needed a walker. And honestly, within weeks to months, she was in a wheelchair. Well, it turned out that he couldn't take care of her anymore, and she needed long-term care. So she got put into a long-term care facility. And this all happened like literally within a year. It happened fast. No pain through any of that time. And she got to the point where she couldn't lift her arms, she couldn't feed herself, she was non-ambulatory, so she was lying in a nursing home bed. And here she is in the nursing home bed. You saw her here in the nursing home bed. And I'm her power of attorney through all this time, right? So I'm constantly communicating with, it was the John Noble home in Brantford, her long-term care residence. And of course, you know, if you have relatives in that system, it's like medication after vaccine, after medication, after vaccine. And so they would, like, every year, a couple of times a year, oh, it's flu shot season, she's in line for her flu shots. So, and I'd have to sign off on it. And I said to them, this is the very first year she's in it, I said, I can't sign off on that. That's not something that I agree with. She's never had it in her life. She's always been very healthy. And they said, well, you have to come and pick her up because she can't stay here. I thought, like, where's the choice here? So anyway, it turns out she was there for 10 years, non-ambulatory, couldn't feed herself. This is her in her last year of her life. I get a call, it's probably around 2001 or 2002. I get a call from the nursing home. Colin, we're sorry to tell you, your Aunt Ruth has passed away. I saw him, I'm actually, part of me is sad, but part of me, what a blessing for her. So I called the funeral home. We had her funeral all set up, all prepaid. Everything's all ready to go. I called the funeral home. They said, okay, we'll head down to the nursing home. You have to sign off on her release. I said, okay, fine. I signed the papers. They go down to the nursing home. This is later that day. I get a call from the funeral home. He said, Colin, he said, we were actually in her room where she's lying dead, getting her body into the bag, zipping up the bag. She's breathing. They actually pronounced her dead. All this time, when I was going down to see her, I'm adjusting her. So there's still that element of life in there. So she lasted another week, and then she finally passed. But this is, and I guess what I'm getting at, you guys, is that this is our medical system is not meant to help people express life and express health. It is meant to suppress. It is meant to numb. And honestly, like, who wants to live the last 10 years of their life like that? Terrible. So through all this, I got to the point where I honestly took this as something that was going to drive me. And I started telling this story we started doing doctor's reports at the office because I thought people need to start hearing about this. And so I actually started becoming like on this mission to let people know about the seriousness and the dangers of medication, long-term medication use. And so here's a list, and this is just a short part of the list that I actually printed off. And I went on, if you can go on ChatGPT and type in, give me all the medications that were on the market that were then taken off the market because they were causing danger or harmful side effects or death. And here's just a touching on this list. You got painkillers, anti-inflammatories, diet, weight loss pills, diabetes medications, antibiotics, heart and blood pressure medications, antidepressants, gastrointestinal medications, hormone and reproductive drugs. They all were passed, put on the market. Some of them, and keep in mind, they're passed by basically putting it on somebody's desk who has the authority to pass them, along with a check from the manufacturer saying, hey, will you sign off on this? So understand, this is what happens. And then they get put on the market, and then next thing you know, people are dying from them, and oh, we better take them off the market. So listen, what we do saves lives. Like, you guys have to understand, what we do saves lives. You know, chiropractic is not a treatment for back pain. Chiropractic is not a treatment for any symptom. Chiropractic is a way of life, and it is a way that when people get under chiropractic care, it can allow them to express their full human potential. There's something incredibly great about what we do here. When I was on this podcast yesterday with Gilles Lamarche, Gilles is a fantastic guy. Like, he is one of the most positive, upbeat guys. 70 years old. He's going as strong as ever. He's still competing in masters, track and field, and he's the vice president at Life University. And if you've ever been to a seminar, you hear, you know, year after year after year, there's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. You know, I remember that when I was, you remember that? Every seminar, there's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. And then 2 years later, there's never been a better time to, you know what? Now, in 2025, there has never, ever been a better time to be a chiropractor. If you guys decide you want to go to chiropractic school, now is the time to do it. Because I'm going to tell you, over the next few years, especially the changes politically that's happening in the United States, what's happening in the world, what we stand for and our principle is going to be above and beyond anything else in healthcare. I promise you that. It's happening. You can see it happening. Look at ChatGPT. So what chiropractic? Chiropractic care demonstrates a clear impact on nervous system function, physiological stress response, and overall well-being. This is ChatGPT. Given these findings, it would indeed be logical for chiropractic care to be a first-line intervention. What does that mean? First-line intervention. Chiropractors in a hospital, in an emergency ward, chiropractors in every single medical clinic to assess the person before they got any type of medical treatment, medication, intervention, anything like that, especially for musculoskeletal issues, chronic pain management, and functional neurologic concerns. And we're going to touch on this. Functional neurological concerns before resorting to invasive medical procedures. So, get better at communicating chiropractic. Get better at communicating the neurology and the neurological impact of removing a subluxation and removing the interference from a chiropractic or from a patient, from a spine. Neurological impact. Spinal adjustments influence proprioception, brain activity, and autonomic balance, as seen in functional MRI and HRV studies. Improvement of serum biomarkers, cytokines, reduced inflammatory response in cortisol, and brain response to pain subjectivity. When I was at National my very first year, my intern, who was 2 years above me, got me to go into a study. And the study was to measure the response of a chiropractic adjustment on the immune system. So they were actually measuring white blood cells at the time. So I was a patient in this study. So what they would do is they took blood from me before my adjustment. I would get adjusted, wait about 30 minutes afterwards, and then they would take blood again. And they would measure the white blood cell count. And in literally every single subject, there was an increase in white blood cells after the adjustment. So a clear effect on the immune system after chiropractic care. So, and you talk about this, serum biomarkers, when you can start to see the changes, the biochemistry changes that happen after the adjustment, the body completely changes. And this is really cool. So, and I was talking about this on our call the other day. When you look at HRV, do you know who knows what HRV and can explain it very well? So Steve, what's HRV?
I don't know if I can explain it that well. It's the ability for the heart rate to adapt.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the more rigid our heart rate is, or less little distress.
That's exactly right. So and the key word is adapt, right? Adaptability. So an HRV that is low has been shown, and I mentioned this on the call, is that when you have a low HRV, heart rate variability, your body is unadaptable. Okay, so the HRV, the heart rate variability, is the time, and it might be microseconds between the beats. So a low heart rate variability. So if the beats are very systematic between beats, that's a low HRV. But the Mayo Clinic and WebMD will actually show, when you go on there and type in HRV, those statistics, the HRV that is low, are related to low immune function, higher risk of heart disease, higher risk of cancer, higher risk of neurological disorders. Okay? So knowing that, we want to obviously get our patients to have a higher HRV. So higher HRV is a sign of better health and adaptability. And if your body has a better adaptability, you can adapt to your environment. If you went into a room with a bunch of people who had COVID, if you had a higher HRV, your chances of your immune system kicking into gear and you not getting COVID would be a lot higher. Or if you did get COVID and you had a higher HRV, your immune system is functioning better, you would probably recover faster and functionally much more efficient. Okay, does that make sense? So that's been shown, that's been documented. Those are medical studies. Okay, that's truth. So now we talk about the vagus nerve, and I put it up here, vagus, not Vegas. Christopher Kent is a friend of mine. He was actually on the podcast. And you know Christopher. So I used to listen to On Purpose back when I was early in practice. Christopher Kent and Pat Gentempo. And what a brilliant guy. He's probably one of the smartest people in our profession. But he has this T-shirt, and he was wearing it when we went out to dinner. This is going back a couple of years ago. And it actually says Vegas, like Vegas nerve, not Vegas, like Las Vegas. It was actually quite a good T-shirt. I thought I want to make one of those for myself. But anyway, so this is cool. So I'm on that podcast with Dr. Monique Andrews. Here she is right here. This is us the other day. That was on Wednesday. And so we start talking about the neurology. So Monique talks about the neurology. Now this is really, and I wanted to bring this up for you guys because this is so cool, because this justifies everything that you do. And I'm kind of a radical guy. Like when I get in front of patients and I do my doctor's report and I talk about this, like subluxation and medication are the two biggest killers on the face of the earth. They are. And people look at me and go, what the heck does that mean? Like, is this guy nuts? Is he some sort of conspiracy theorist? Like what's, but when you think about it in this regard, it makes perfect sense, because when you take a nervous system and you either chemically or physiologically suppress that nervous system, you suppress the body's ability to adapt to its environment. And if the body can't adapt to its environment, it is a precursor for disease in that body. And if you allow a body to not be able to adapt, what's the chances of that person getting heart problems or cancer or some sort of serious infection, whatever that is, where they can't heal from? And that's what happens. So subluxation and medication suppress the nervous system. They suppress the adaptability. So I say, hey, they're the two biggest killers on the planet. They're the precursors to a lot of different diseases and conditions. And if you start to see this, so this is, and I got this right from Dr. Monique. Here's C1, here's C2. The vagus nerve comes out of the neck. So what, vagus nerve is what? A cranial nerve. What number? You guys are good. Do you remember the mnemonic? The cranial nerve mnemonic? Mike, you probably remember. To touch and feel a girl's vagus and yeah. So that's how I remember. So vagus is number 10. So here we are, the vagus nerve. So C1, C2, vagus nerve comes up, and then there's two ganglion that come up. So one is the superior sympathetic ganglion, and one is the nodose ganglion. Well, look at their association with the transverse process right here. So now here we are, and we practice a form of corrective chiropractic care. So you x-ray a patient, and you see a straight neck. You see an atlas on the lateral cervical that's in flexion, right? So what happens is when you have a straight neck, how's the tension on that nerve? It's pulled, right? It's like taking either end of it and pulling it. And then this TVP, as this shifts forward, what's it pressing into? This nodose ganglion. So what happens is you reduce vagal tone. And when you reduce vagal tone, the body goes into this something called sympathetic dominance. And you probably know people who are sympathetic dominant. They're stressed all the time. They're in constant stress. It's like this fight or flight response. But what happens is, physiologically, there's less blood flow to the brain, less blood flow to the brainstem, all because of pressure on this vagus nerve. The heart can't adapt properly, so HRV goes down. And so low HRV is a clear-cut sign of vagal tension. It's actually called cardiovagal syndrome. There's a condition called POTS, and Dr. Monique Dr. Monique talks about this. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, P-O-T-S. And what it is, it's basically because of misalignment in the spine, subluxation in the spine, abnormal alignment, somebody who's got scoliosis, somebody who's got subluxation, somebody who's got a kyphotic neck, there's so much tension on the nerve that it causes the heart to react in a way where it can't adapt, and you have constant tachycardia, right? So you might know people that have a flutter, like a heartbeat, and what happens medically, what do? They take them in and they open them up and they do what's called an ablation. You heard about that? Right? And they burn off nerves in the heart to try to slow the heart down, but the problem's not here, it's here. You have so much in your mind, in your education, and in your hands to change lives. It's incredible. And we don't even realize it. As a profession, we don't even realize it. So you individually, as team members, as kinesiologists, as chiropractors, you have the ability to change lives. And it's time to step up to the plate and start doing that. So here's Dr. Monique. And she actually said she'd like for you guys, because she's doing a free class on the 19th. And if you guys want to sign up for that, you can scan this QR code here. She also has courses. And if you want stuff from her to talk about this type of thing, the neurology behind subluxation, she's very principled and she's very scientific. So she can show you neurologically how subluxation affects the body in this way, how it creates dysautonomia, this imbalance, this autonomic imbalance. So scan that QR code. You can go on her website. You can either sign up for her courses. She's got this $100 coupon if you want to sign up for her regular newsletters and her regular, she'll just keep sending you studies, and she breaks down these studies into layman's terms that you can use to teach your patients or use in your doctor's reports or however you want to use them to talk about this type of stuff instead of this is the way we stretch our back when we have back pain, and this is how we stretch our QL muscle. The QL muscle is right here. That's the stuff we're getting taught. That's what our students are getting taught at CMCC. Like, there's so much more to chiropractic. So and sign up for that free training on the 19th, okay? Here's what's happening. Montana, I don't know if you've heard about this, Montana, the bill HB 500, they want, so the board, right? And typically the boards don't think about what we're talking about today. The boards think about how can we amalgamate with the medical community? How can we not have them look at us like wackos? So that's essentially, so they want to get prescription rights. So this is the bill HB 500 in Montana, which is allowing chiropractors to prescribe muscle relaxants, NSAIDs, glucocorticoids, topical anesthetics, and trigger point injections. It's totally taking our profession and morphing it into something that was never created for. So we need people to stand up for the principle. And that's why I'm sharing this with you guys. We need people to take a stand to say that we have something great. We have a principle that the world needs to know. We can't conform to the medical thinking, because the medical thinking over centuries has shown that it's failure. It's one drug after the next that's literally killing people. Listen, is there a time and space for medicine? Of course there is. During crisis, during emergency situations, but not as a lifestyle. Last thing here. So this is an article from 1904. Okay, I love chiropractic history, and I often search up a lot of this stuff, chiropractic history. So this is Chiropractic defined by D.D. Palmer, and I'm going to enlarge it here a little bit. It says right here, chiropractic as deemed by the discoverer and developer. All acts or movements or any or all parts of the body, including the circulation of the fluids, whether normal, in excess, or lack thereof, are but functions of the nerves. Everything is functions of the nerve. There's not an ache or pain, but that are sensations of deranged nerves. Every act and thought is controlled by innate and educated nerves. He classifies innate nerves as being the autonomic nervous system and educated nerves as being the somatic nervous system. The body is heat by caloric nerves, whether the heat is furnished in normal quantity as in health or in abnormal amounts as in the so-called fevers, which is but excessive heat, whether in part or of the whole body. We are in health when the innate and educated nerves are free to act natural, when there's no subluxation. Diseases and conditions caused by nerves being excited or depressed, deranging their functions. Innate nerves run all the vital functions of innervation, assimilation, circulation, respiration when we are asleep or awake. Dreams, whether remembered or not, are sensations of the innate nerves. All diseases are but the result of deranged nerves. 95% of these are caused by vertebral, he calls them vertebral luxations, so misalignments of the vertebrae, which impinge nerves. These displacements may be caused by accidents while we are awake or asleep. Chiropractors use the long bones and processes as handles to adjust the spine. It's beautiful. Like, I mean, right in 1904, this is what our profession was founded on. It was founded on removing interference from the nervous system to allow the power within the body to flourish uninhibited. We're going to have an awesome training today. So open your mind. We're going to have a lot of engagement today. I mean, we're going to do some stuff. So this is a time to break through your inhibitions. This is a time to get better at communicating chiropractic and just become a better person. Just become somebody who can serve people in a better way. Love you guys. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hey, if you're a chiropractor and this message resonates with you and you're at the point where you'd like to take your practice to the next level, you'd like to be able to serve more people, you'd like to scale your practice, be able to have more people come in and get more new patients and be able to convert them from this pain mentality into more of a lifetime wellness type of care. If that message resonates with you, if you're looking at getting some marketing systems to attract people into your type of practice where you can serve them and share that message with them, there's a link below that you're welcome to click on that link and set up a call. Be happy to talk to you about what your goals are, about what your current systems are, and even give you some advice on how to change some things just to start getting some better results. And if you're interested in some coaching or some marketing systems to help take your practice to the next level, we can talk about that as well. I'm Dr. Colin. I really look forward to the opportunity to speak with you. Take care. Hope to talk to you soon.